Lois Lane, issue 5. Greg Rucka writing, Mike Perkins on the art.
I dug out Checkmate. I'm on issue 6 of the run. I'm in full Rucka mode, just like I was for his Wonder Woman. So I'm dialed in. And this is basically Greg Rucka's treatise on how to be a journalist. And what it means. Almost like he's doing a service to maybe someone that wouldn't know like how news is supposed to be in this infotainment era.
I felt that the person on the plane she's talking to at the start when she's flying to Washington is just like this ignorant person who has all these weird conspiracy theory opinions on how journalism is done.
I think the problem is they're not weird conspiracy theories on how journalism does. That's a very when she goes, just because you say you're not allowed to do it, I mean, what's to stop you from just and just pretending?
And then the media plays into this to where they think that we make this up, so we have to go so far the other way to show them that we're being fair on both sides instead of just reporting, hey, this is what we're hearing and how journalism works. And still a lot of people don't understand this. Like even Pete so far to go to like a lot of wrestling stuff about sources and quote unquote wrestling journalism, that you can't just take backstage rumors and put them out there as news, right? These are just things you're hearing unless you've corroborated them and looked at other sources, like other independent sources to fact check, which a lot of people don't have time to do because in this day and age, it's all about who gets it out first. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the complete story, which then feeds the cycle of conspiracy theories. And, well, that's not what I heard. Well, I got it from this news, so they're the only ones that are right. And it's like, well, no, maybe you should take it from different, and cobble together. Maybe you need, as a news, what's the word, consumer, need to look at multiple sources, not just get it from one place.
I agree, which is why I don't think this is a crazy conspiracy theory. I think this is actually a very mainstream opinion.
But
I don't know. I got from what the way this character sounded to me, sounded like, because the way she kept saying like, "Oh, I know you don't do that, but all these other people I expect to do this." Like it sounded like a racist trying to justify why they like their one friend who's not white.
It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I have a Latino friend, or I have a black.
That's
friend,
what it sounded like to me. So this person to me sounded like a very unlikable, short-sighted individual to me. So I don't know how over where you guys are, what the relationship between the general public and the media is, but since 2016, it's almost an all-out war. Like people I know and that I work with don't trust the news. Period. And I think that that might be the most shameful thing, is that news has become politicized when it's something you don't want to hear. And I've fallen victim to that, like going like, well, no, consider the source, but then, not to toot my own horn, but I can go back and corroborate it.
Yeah, I don't think
a lot of people don't want to take that legwork.
I don't think it's quite as extreme here. It is interesting that there are views like the BBC is our, state-owned, broadcaster, and they have a long tradition of being very, fair news. Traditionally, there's debate as to whether or not that's still true, but what always gets me is both sides, the left and right, complain of bias against them repeatedly on a daily basis on the same story. They will say, but this is biased against us because of this, and the other side will say, but this is biased against us because of this.
Right.
And you kind of come out and go, I hate if you're both feeling that. Maybe there is something in the middle there.
Yeah. So here, what happens is, the news will report something that doesn't look good to the right, right? Yeah. So what they'll do to get up so people don't get so mad, they'll cover it from the right angle looking towards the left. But very rarely do they do it from the left angle looking at the right, because they don't feel like they need to do that. Because the right, and at least here in the States, is a very vocal minority, and they don't want to look bad, so they'll just take it. And it's very frustrating because you just want the basic news, right? Like I don't need a spin. I can put my own stuff on that. And it's very rare anymore.
It's why I found can't even say this, Twitter, an amazing source for news journalism, especially on the political spectrum, because you can very easily follow people that don't just agree with your opinions, but also, from the other side, and see how they report on the same stories.
Yeah.
And you really end up with a very clear picture, seeing it from both sides. It's much easier to kind of see the full picture that way, I think.
Well, and I feel too here, it also goes to your political affiliation, that a lot of people want to claim that they're not too far to one side. Like, again, that's another thing I fall a victim to. So they feel like if they just play the middle, that makes it feel better for them. And it's like, well, no, you're bringing into whatever. It's the cave on Dagobah. You're bringing with you whatever's already with you.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't want to admit that they're going to read it from a certain point of view.
Yeah.
And so here, what I love, to tie it back into Lois, I love that Lois is like, as a journalist, like, no, we're supposed to be not so much a spectator or a judge. We're bringing you the news. We're the messenger.
I think that the bias in that level comes from not of how they report it necessarily, but a lot of it is what they choose to report, what details they include or don't include compared to other journalists.
Well, and that's what makes a good reporter, right? I don't know if you're familiar with the Watergate scandal, but that's what made Woodward and Bernstein, is that they wanted to do the work. And I don't know if this is true, because again, I don't hang out with journalists or people that consider themselves journalists. But from what I get that gets reported, people don't want to do the legwork anymore. They just, all these big news corporations just want the first clicks. So they don't necessarily feel like they need the full story. And right now in this country, we have impeachment going on and whatnot.
Yeah.
And it's all about, now they have to think as how the news is going to cover it.
It's because legwork takes time. And if you take time, you're behind everyone else. And suddenly you're missing out on all the money.
Right. And in the age of social media, it moves that much faster, and you're constantly playing catch up. Whereas back in the old newspaper days, they kind of were in charge of the framing, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's mad, especially in some of the events that happen, in this day, like UK politics. There was, before we're in the middle of a general election campaign now, but just before it started, if you just watch like the 10 o'clock news one night and then the next night, you'd go from hearing, there might be an election called tomorrow, and then the following night you'd go, yep, there's an election called, and you'd go, okay, sure. If you follow Twitter, you would go from 10 o'clock the first night going, well, there might be an election, to there's definitely going to be an election, to hang on, and then okay, election's on, people, and then back to okay, it's on again.
It's almost real time now.
Yeah.
And so and they're trying their damnedest to keep up, and I don't have the answers for all of this, but I can definitely think that just do your homework a little more, right? Like, stop rushing things out, because that's to me what's more reckless than anything. There's all the talk about the Joker and whatnot, and the media bias there, because people so wanted, because it was a bit,
they wanted the
reckless.
Controversy because if that's the story, people will click on it because they're interested.
Right. And now you have a blowback against the media because of all the stuff, and it's like, well, no, but yeah. So the media has become, instead of being the bullhorn, right? Like, they're supposed to get the thing out. Now they're what the bullhorn is talking about, and it's a bit reductive. So again, trying to tie this back into Lois, is Rucka sees all this. If you've read any of his stuff, right, he has a deep love of the machinations of all of these systems. From Lazarus to even as I'm reading Checkmate. And I mean, the whole Wonder Woman stuff when she was a diplomat. Yeah. So the fact, almost, I don't want to say this is a civics lesson, because it's really not a civics lesson, right? The Lois stuff in here. But, learning the difference between a off the record and a deep source and all how that works. I didn't go to journalism school, so learning all of this through the pages of comic book.
A big part of the middle of this book is explaining the different terminology and what off the record actually means in terms of what can be published and what can be used and so on and so on. I like the issue. This is kind of a weird issue, actually. I thought, in terms of story, I had this weird feeling this week where a lot of my issues felt like they weren't full stories. And I think Lois Lane, even though it's a very good book, is actually also guilty of this, because I got to the end of this and felt like, this is also over.
Well, and I also, this is one I love journalism stuff. I love those movies, so this is hitting right in my key demo. So I feel a little bit more, you know, a little bit more biased towards it. But then I also feel the question stuff almost feels like an afterthought, but I still enjoyed it.
I enjoyed the question stuff.
Interestingly, with the question stuff, I think the way that ends feels like a super traditional comic book ending of an issue, right? So in that sense, this kind of felt like a rounded issue more than some of the others, because the way, you know, that builds and it ends, and it doesn't, you know, go into the next stage, obviously, but where it ends is like, okay, that's a classic comic cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So I felt like by ending on that page, it made me feel like I got a full issue, even if some of the Lois stuff definitely didn't.
Yeah. No, I get it. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. And it's kind of low key. Even the question stuff that we see out of Renee, I really like how, you know, the light coming off, like the energy, the blue, like almost lightning, and all of those scenes. I thought that was really cool. Just nice, Perkins, Perkins also, still doing real well.
I think having the blank face really helps him because there's a handful of times in this issue where I look at someone's face and go, ooh.
Yeah.
Whereas just being blank like that is it's perfect for him.
Not gonna disagree.
There was one really early on, like the second or third page. I think it was second page, top right panel. Lois just, I don't know, the whole facial shape just looks off.
Yeah,
it was weird, and it was not a great start.
Yeah, but then as she's talking to you know, a couple pages later, she's talking to Renee, and you know, she calls her hot stuff, and there's a back and forth there that I feel like the expressions there really work.
Yeah,
you know, like you could almost take away the dialogue and look at them, and know they're having a witty conversation. So I guess it just depends on what he wants to focus on.
Yeah, it's kind of hit or miss in that sense.
Yeah, and I will say too, some of the, like, there's that where you first see the question, and her costume's a little bit weird. Renee's not the type to show off that much.
It's the way the top is like pulled down extra over the bra for no real reason.
No, and I'm just kind of like, all right, that doesn't work.
Yeah, the actual fight scene where she's fighting all the guys in the bar, whatever it is, though, looks quite good. She's smashing bottles, nice 2-page layouts. Then we go to the whole lesson about all the different terminology. And you know, kind of ends with Lois kind of using the statue of the soldiers and talking about them. They're making their choice, and the allusions here are very obvious. She's kind of saying that this woman who works in Congress is like, you're essentially a soldier on the front line, and this is a really hard choice you're about to make, as if you're going to tell me whatever you're about to tell me. But you know, these soldiers made the choice they had to on the front lines anyway, and did it and got the job done. So that's kind of like how she kind of convinces her to sort of go down the path, which is, you know, a big moment. And there's a fun conversation when she's talking to Perry, and Clark's kind of in Perry's office. Perry's looking for Jimmy because he wants his bow tie tied.
Yep.
Did anyone else think Perkins Clark looks like on the chubby side? Like, I don't know if this is like really intentional. Like,
I think he's supposed to look frumpy. I feel like his shirt's half untucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I took it.
Well, I thought that in the first couple of panels, it was the side profile shot where Perry's telling him, "Be married on your own time."
Yeah.
Like that one, I'm like, yeah, Clark definitely looks on the larger side there. Is this intentional? Like he wears his shirts like that just as an extra layer to kind of throw people off.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there was that whole thing that he took acting classes. I forget the Russian acting teacher that it comes from, because there's method and then there's this other one.
Yeah.
And like he purposely slouches and hunches his shoulders forward when he's Daily Planet Clark, you know. Yeah. But I can see that. But to me, it looked like his shirt's just half untucked and makes him look sloppy, which you kind of want for Clark Kent.
Yeah, that's
fair. But no, the "be married on your own timeline" really popped me. That got me, got a good laugh.
This really felt like Perry, didn't it?
Yeah, and I still wanted a Greg Rucka Daily Planet bullpen book. So, DC, if y'all are listening to us, let's give him what he wants so we can get this, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. Renee's whole thing, of course, is she's trying to figure out who the assassin and who the target was specifically from that previous assassination attempt. and it just ends with her torturing the guy, hanging him upside down, Batman style, and as she points out, is a very Batman-esque move. Although usually it's over the top of a building, but she's not got time for that. So.
I liked her whole bit as whether he can't decide if he's Batman or the Batman.
Yeah.
A good chuckle.
Yeah. No, it was solid. It was a solid issue. I kind of felt, again, this was like another book for me that I kind of felt like I like there wasn't a whole lot of advancement in it. There was a lot of like because the whole conversation on the plane with the woman at the start, and then the whole conversation with the congresswoman or whoever she was, like all of that stuff. It was these long conversations that were stopping to talk about a particular thing, and the conversations were actually quite interesting in what they were doing, but they weren't exactly kind of advancing things in and of themselves. They were kind of there to sort of present a little piece about an idea, like this is what this means or this is what this is. And
I also feel like that's been his point. That's been Rucka's point since the book started.
It is kind of a bit mere in the sense of, what me and Matt were talking about. Okay, journalists need to put in the legwork and play the long game. And this is literally watching Lois do that.
Yeah.
Oh, no, sure. But I think the balance in this issue definitely felt like it was more that than it was everything else. And because of that, I got to the end and I kind of felt like, oh, it's over. Okay. I guess, like, we spent so many pages on these other things that when I got to the end of the book, I was like, oh, it's done. Okay. That's what it is. Matt, what are you giving it?
I'm going to give this an 8.5.
Connor?
A little bit lower. I'm going to go with an 8.
I would go with 7.5. Pretty good. But probably my least favourite of the Lois issues so far, though, out of the 5.